Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast AM, the very best in late night talk radio. I'm Richard Syrett, sitting in for George Norrie, and tonight this morning I'm coming to you live from the home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. And I hope you're having a relaxing, enjoyable, and sumptuous Thanksgiving with family and friends. Like a thief in the night, artificial intelligence has inserted itself into our lives. It makes important decisions for us every day. Often, we barely notice. As Joe Allen writes in his groundbreaking book, Transhumanism is the great merger of humankind with the machine. At this stage in history, it consists of billions using smartphones. Going forward, we'll be hardwiring our brains to artificial intelligence systems. The world-famous robot Sophia, developed by Hong Kong-based company Hanson Robotics, symbolizes a rising techno-religion. She takes her name from the goddess, or Eon, whose fall from grace is described in the Gnostic Gospels. With an academic background in both science and theology, Joe Allen confronts the paradox of what he calls good people constructing a digital abomination. Dark Eon is nothing less than a cri de coeur for humanity itself. He takes us on a roller coaster ride through history and the emergence of scientism, and from government-mandated mRNA vaccines to the weird visions of cyborg billionaires like Elon Musk. From Silicon Valley to China, these globalists' visions of humanity's future, exposed and described in Dark Eon, are dire and terrifying. But Joe Allen argues that humanity's salvation is within our grasp, only if we refuse to avert our eyes from the impending twilight before us. Joe Allen is here in hours 1 and 2. In the second half, open lines, politics and COVID-free as usual. Aside from those parameters, you can steer the call-in portion anywhere you'd like. Hopefully, we can keep it strange, mysterious, maybe even a little bit scary. And if I might, here are a couple of potential jumping off points. Now, I've tossed these conversation starters out previously and received a terrific response, so let's try again and see what we get this time around. I'm looking for stories involving an encounter with a mysterious stranger that somehow changed your life. And here's some more kindling for the electronic campfire. I'm looking for stories involving something you've found, discovered, unearthed, some remarkable object from a garage sale, or as they say in the UK, a car boot sale. Maybe you dug it up in your back garden while planting potatoes. Maybe you snagged it accidentally while fishing for smallmouth bass, or uncovered it while cleaning out your auntie's basement. Mysterious strangers and unearthed objects during open lines in hours 3 and 4. But first, AI. Are we building our own nightmare? Joe Allen is next. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak in a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Syrett, sitting in for George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? Joe Allen is author of Dark Eon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. He's written for Chronicles, The Federalist, Human Events, The National Pulse, Parabola, Salvo, and Protocol, the Journal of the Entertainment Technology Industry, and he holds a master's degree from Boston University where he studied cognitive science and human evolution as they pertain to religion. As an arena rigger, he's toured the world for rock and roll, country, rap, classical, and cage fighting productions, and he now serves as the transhumanism editor for Bannon's War Room. Joe Allen, welcome to Coast AM. How are you?
Richard, honored to be here. Doing very well.
Transhumanism editor. I've not heard of another transhumanism editor in the media before. Are you, as far as you know, are you the only one?
I'm the only one. I'm the first, and as the term goes out of fashion, perhaps the last. But that's me.
Well, I don't know. I'm surprised. You would think this is such a huge area of interest now. Everybody's talking about it. You would think by now practically every newspaper, or at least the digital versions, would have an AI or a transhumanism editor. Why don't they? Do you suppose?
I think going forward, they'll just call it, science, technology, progress. It seems to be so infused in the culture and disturbingly so readily accepted that I don't think that the kind of sense of the uncanny that transhumanism evokes will linger, at least not as long as I would like.
AI and transhumanism. We tend to sort of intermingle those terms. Are they the same thing?
Yes and no. You could say that pretty much every transhumanist, or at least every transhumanist I'm aware of, looks to AI as a method of human improvement. But most AI programmers, or at least many, don't necessarily see it in such extreme terms as a transhumanist would. Transhumanists are looking to augment the human to the point that we have gone beyond the human. Whereas, at least even the coders that I know, their purpose is really more mundane. Their purpose is to create computer algorithms that will sell and idealistically create computer programs that will improve people's lives.
I'm just reading from a blog that you wrote back in December of 2021, so almost 2 years ago exactly. You write, artificial intelligence operates on a different plane than human reason. As described by various futurists and technologists, AI is literally an alien mind. In advanced artificial neural networks, the modes of cognition, the logical steps behind any given conclusions are completely incomprehensible even to their creators. What is meant by AI being an alien mind?
It's a mode of cognition that has never existed on the planet before. There are a lot of ways in which machines imitate human physical activities, and machines are oftentimes built from biological designs, but they didn't really think. Many would argue that artificial intelligence isn't really thinking, but an example I use oftentimes, if a dog were to begin reciting poetry, or if a dog was able to generate an image, however unoriginal, you would call that dog brilliant. And yet, oftentimes when people look to artificial intelligence, they see it as a sort of gimmick, even though they've made sand that could speak. They've used a form of digital alchemy so that even sand can create a painting. And when you look at the images generated by artificial intelligence, when you look at the sorts of models of the world that artificial intelligence produces, and especially when you think about the ways in which artificial intelligence is altering the way people behave in the world, altering human thought, all of it is in fact alien. It is something that it's almost human, but in its weirdness, in its coldness, in its logic, it's a mode of thought that it might as well be coming from another planet.
In this blog, you're reviewing 2 books on the subject of AI. The first one, The Age of AI and Our Human Future. The second one, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. You write, the former argues that artificial intelligence already displays unearthly powers of perception. It will soon determine the fate of nations. The latter envisions algorithms becoming quasi-spiritual entities who cradle a new humanity. These beings are inevitable, the authors maintain, and the risks to our freedom are profound. First of all, what do you mean by, or what is meant in these books that the envisions of algorithms becoming quasi-spiritual entities?
Well, that was in reference to Kai-Fu Lee's book, AI 2041. Kai-Fu Lee, as it happens, comes from my hometown of Knoxville, Tennessee, but his family, I believe, was Chinese. He went on to return to China. He now runs an investment corporation called Sinovision, investing in different AI companies, and he's a frequent flyer at the World Economic Forum. In his book, co-authored with a fiction writer from China, they describe what they think will be the world we live in, published in 2021, in 20 years. And they oftentimes turn to these religious motifs. So they talk about, in India, an animated god that a young person is turning to for all of the deepest questions of life. There are motifs in which children have an AI companion, sort of like a guardian angel, that follows them throughout their life, that learns from them, and of course teaches the child. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's really, it's everything that religions have talked about for millennia, except in this instance, it's digital. It's something that man has made. And for an atheist, and almost all people in this space, with a few exceptions, they're atheists. So for them, religious stories are just stories. They don't have any kind of, they're not reflecting a deeper supernatural reality. And in this godless universe, it seems that the only thing that human beings can do is to create gods, to create angels, to create demons. And that's exactly what Kai-Fu Lee is describing, the creation of disembodied spirits that human beings commune with through either virtual reality and augmented reality, or, he doesn't necessarily believe that Neuralink or any sort of thing like that will come online, but if you listen to Elon Musk, he's saying that the ultimate communion with these gods will be through a brain-computer interface in which electrodes are snaking into every corner of the brain, and a human being then becomes, in some sense, part of that spiritual digital reality.
You, going back to the blog for a moment, because there's so much to unpack just in the first couple of paragraphs, you write, as legacy humans, I love that term, legacy humans, our choice is to either reject this alien intelligence and fall behind, or to forge a human-AI symbiosis to let ethereal tentacles probe us, analyze us, and guide our evolution. Normal people are horrified by either prospect, but that's irrelevant. The future doesn't care about your feelings, nor do the people creating and directing it. Fall behind or forge a human-AI symbiosis. So let's talk about these two choices. So if we decide to just reject artificial intelligence and become complete Luddites and maybe, I don't know, live among the Amish, what's so wrong? What's so bad with that option?
Well, myself, I'm more and more attracted to that option every day. But the way that this is being framed is, of course, the future, right? This is the future. And if you don't acquiesce to the future, then you are relegated to the past. So just to take this future, capital F, take this future at face value, the way it's presented is that as other human beings begin to adapt to it, to take on these artificial intelligences as partners, as symbiotic co-organisms, we are presented with a situation in which you are not able to keep up. So look at the educational system, or look at any corporation, or look at military conflict. The way it's presented is that without the advantage of artificial intelligence, those who fall behind, those who don't have their brain upgraded, so to speak, or at least their cognitive landscape upgraded, they will not be able to compete against those who do. Now, I think that it's quite likely that there's a lot of arrogance in this. There's a lot of blindness to possible downsides, and so it's possible or even probable that those who turn their cognition over, at least a portion of their cognition over to the machine, will not in the long term function as well as those who remain legacy humans, at least to some degree. But because the system that we live in America, in China, in Europe, in India, increasingly across the world, we live in a system where it's normal to kind of partner with these machines, to be symbiotic with it. If you don't have a smartphone, for instance, people kind of look at you askance. They think that you're strange. They think that you're backward and behind, especially potential employers. If you increase that, or if you expand that out to all of these other technologies that are rapidly being either imposed or at least introduced into the society, it isn't necessarily that according to an objective evolutionary paradigm that you're falling behind, but according to that social construct you are. And so in essence, when I was writing there, was in some ways channeling what the authors of The Age of AI, that's Eric Schmidt, Daniel Huttenlocher, and of course Kinzinger, Henry Kinzinger. What you have there is these power players who are describing a world in which artificial intelligence will be integrated into every aspect of the society. And those who have not adapted, those who have not conformed, those who have not become symbiotes, will be either excluded openly or at least implicitly excluded because they can't keep up. It's really horrifying to me for a number of reasons, but maybe the most is that it's a social construct as much as anything else. And whenever you see this in history, whenever you see a sort of norm introduced in which conformity is expected and it's widely adopted, especially when it's imposed by authority, then you do end up in a situation where those who don't conform, those who don't become part of the system, are, of course, disadvantaged or even excluded entirely.
So if we vie for door number 2 and forge a human AI symbiosis, and as you write, to let ethereal tentacles probe us, analyze us, and guide our evolution, what do we lose in that bargain?
Well, I think that the first thing you lose is the kind of freedom of an organic existence, and the other thing that you lose is the synchronicity or the serendipity of the spiritual life that bubbles up beneath that organic existence or comes down from above that organic existence. When you look at the digital system, when you look at the digital life, it's so calculated, it's so controlled. Even the freedom that's offered within that digital system is in some way ensnared by it. And so it's something as simple as finding your way from one place to the other, to the extent that you have turned your mind over to the algorithm, you lose all of the interactions that typically would have accompanied you along the way on your journey. Where do I go, you may ask a person, or even that wrong turn that takes you down what happened to be the right path. Again, extrapolate that out to friendship, extrapolate that out to romance, extrapolate that out to the long-term decision-making of the society. I think that what you lose is all of the different forces, both organic and spiritual, that have brought us up to this point. What they say we gain is, of course, something that approaches omniscience, or at least this higher state of awareness, this higher consciousness. And it's not simply Google Maps and the algorithms feeding you Netflix videos that they're speaking of. They're speaking of the Internet of Bodies, so that your every physiological function and state is tracked by algorithms, and you are...
Joe, I gotta jump in here. Pardon the interruption. We'll take a quick time out. Joe Allen, author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. The Rolling Stones taking us into the break with Almost Hear You Sigh, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Joe Allen is with us, the author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, and he serves as the transhumanism editor for Bannon's War Room. And just before the break, I was asking you about if humans, as you point out in a recent blog, humans have sort of a choice to either reject what you call this alien intelligence and fall behind, or to forge a human AI symbiosis and let ethereal tentacles probe us, analyze us, and guide our evolution. And we had to go to a break, so I kind of cut you off there, Joe. And I asked you towards the end there, what do we risk losing if we do, in fact, choose to forge a human-AI symbiosis? And I think you had some more to say there.
Quite simply, I think that we have our souls to lose. I think that the deepest parts of the human being are expressed by ways in which technology really can't get at. You will not be able to extract what's most beautiful in the human by way of artificial intelligence or a brain-computer interface or any of that. I think that this depth is quite ancient, and the ways to reach it are also quite ancient. And the novelty of technology, in fact, is a distraction. It's a deadening of that depth, or at least it obscures it. The way that they bill it, of course, is that this is just simply inevitable, that technology is invariably going to give certain human beings an advantage over others, give certain societies advantages over others. And that's true on the worldly plane. If you look at the expansion of the West through colonization, it's by and large, it was made possible by technology. And while I myself am a Christian, and while I myself am a proud Westerner, I think that it's also inarguable that the West destroyed much of what is beautiful in other cultures and in other places. And so when you look at the narrative that they're spinning, when you look at this idea that technology is this next leap in evolution and that human beings must adapt to it or be left behind, there's an implicit threat there. And that threat should be taken very seriously, because as technology confers power on this worldly plane, you already see those traditional cultures being pushed out. Even that Western Christian culture that was at the heart of that first expansion, it's also being eroded by the new technological world, by this new scientific way of viewing the universe. And so as we move forward, and especially as we move forward under this evolutionary paradigm, you can see this, again, implicit threat, implicit justification for displacing or even replacing or even perhaps eliminating those human beings who have not kept up, those human beings who have not evolved. And the very basis of the evolutionary paradigm is, of course, natural selection. And natural selection is, of course, just the hand of death raking over the biome and removing that which is not fit, removing that which has not adapted. And so, as has been for arguably all of human history, but more explicitly so in the last century and a half, The idea is that those cultures which have evolved will displace other cultures by way of that hand of death. That should chill people to their core, unless, of course, you're ready to take the trode and become a cyborg yourself. Then I suppose it's a very happy story with a very happy ending, and you as the hero.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, if for those of us who choose the human AI symbiosis model, we risk losing our soul. Would it be too trite to suggest that what you're discussing here is the mark of the beast in Revelation?
No, I wouldn't say try at all. I don't really interpret the 13th chapter of the Book of Revelation in a strictly literal way, and I don't really look for very, very specific, kind of one-to-one historic correspondences to it. I mean, I've said this many times. Growing up in the South and hearing all of these very, very specific predictions as to how the end of the world is going to play out and how this leader represents this crown on this horn of this head of the beast and all these sorts of things, they never really pan out. The only predictions of the end of the world that seem to pan out are those that push it so far into the future that the predictor is not around to see it fail. But I do take very seriously the motifs of the Revelation, just as I take very seriously the motifs in the Vishnu Purana that describe the descent of humanity into the Kali Yuga. I think these ancient seers were undoubtedly tapping into a reality that exists in a poetic form beyond this world, and yet also gives us an idea of what this world is made of. So you mentioned the mark of the beast, and I think when you look around at some of the corporate products that are blatantly mirroring the image of human beings being marked on the forehead or the hand with a number in order to buy or sell, you don't have to go any farther than your Whole Foods to see that coming to fruition. Your listeners are probably aware that by the end of this year, which that would be roughly a month from now, every Whole Foods on Earth is intended to have an Amazon One palm payment system in it, meaning that people just simply walk up to the register, place their palm over the payment system, and it scans the whorls of your hand, the biometric patterns, and that's linked to your government ID. It's linked to your credit card. And boom, there you go. It's very, very convenient. How could you say no? Amazon builds it as a system that puts you in control. But it also, aside just from the fact that you now have turned human beings into walking mammon, aside from the fact that you've made digital currency so intertwined with the human body, with the human form, it is seemingly almost mockingly an image from the Book of Revelation. Literally, it's a mark on the hand, which is used to buy or sell. Right now, it's not required. In fact, most people haven't adopted it. But the more such things become a norm, just as the smartphone has become a norm, just as the automobile has become a norm, it really doesn't matter if it's a free choice or not. Once it has become an established norm that basically everybody, once you hit a critical mass of people who are comfortable with it, who've adopted it, if you decide to say no, then you are now such an outlier that you don't really belong in society. You don't participate. It's impossible for me to say whether that will be next year or 10 years or 20 years. But it should be, again, very alarming that corporations like Amazon are pushing such a technology and normalizing such a technology, because if it does become a norm, it might as well say 666, right? You might as well literally have a barcode on your forehead at that point. You don't need a chip if you simply have to place your palm above the reader to pay for your goods. And you don't need a chip if, I should better say it, you don't need a mandate if everybody's doing it and if cash goes out of fashion. We are undoubtedly moving towards such a system. And once such a system's in place, it will be much more difficult to dismantle it than it will to put it in place. And should such a system be in place and you decide to dissent, then you are, in fact, just comparable to a chimpanzee watching the humans go about their business in the marketplace.
Yuval Noah Harari, who, as best as I can figure, is Klaus Schwab's number 2 at the World Economic Forum, philosopher, historian. He seems to be in love with this idea, hacking the human mind. He says we have the capability of hacking the human mind. We're going to change what it means to be human. Why is the WEF so keen, so obsessed with transhumanism, artificial intelligence? What do they intend to do with it?
Well, I take Yuval Noah Harari much more as being one who's warning about these systems than promoting them. Certainly, he does have a sort of smart alecky, sneering personality. It comes off as gloating, but if you read Homo Deus very carefully, it's very much a warning about this coming future society. And in his lectures, in his interviews, he's often portraying this as a sort of tragedy. It's an inevitability. Now, as an atheist, he sees it as, again, this sort of evolutionary trajectory. But one way or the other, whatever his actual feelings are on this, the World Economic Forum itself is a hub, an ideological hub, which for years now has pushed Transhumanism, Inc. The World Economic Forum's chairman and founder, Klaus Schwab, 2016 published the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It is basically a declaration that the world is moving towards what Schwab calls the convergence of the physical, the digital, and the biological worlds. And that is, in essence, the kind of heart of transhumanism, the idea that human beings, by way of science, by way of technology, will move into another phase of evolution. But I also think that in some ways, by focusing on the World Economic Forum, it distracts from the people who are really doing this, the actual engine of transformation. The engine of transformation is coming out of Silicon Valley. The engine of transformation is coming out of the U.S. Department of Defense. It's all funded by Wall Street, and of course, you have the executives from Silicon Valley and the heads of these banks meeting at the World Economic Forum. So it's very, very important as an ideological hub. But I do think that the real responsibility for this falls on the tech companies that are pushing these gadgets forward, and also the philosophers, oftentimes hosted at the World Economic Forum, but also elsewhere, the philosophers who are cultivating this worldview that the future evolution of humanity will be driven by technology, and that this future human will be integrated with this technology. And in fact, when you move into the post-human end of that spectrum, what you find are people who they believe in this bizarre, masochistic, or you could say charitably selfless way, that the machines will be the heirs of human endeavor, that the machines themselves will be the torchbearers of consciousness in the future, and that human beings will be irrelevant. Even those humans who have upgraded will be irrelevant compared to these superior machines. And whether anything like that happens on a strictly technical basis, it may not matter. If you have a society that believes the machines are more intelligent, a society that believes that the future belongs not to human beings, and certainly that the future does not belong to the human soul or the human spirit, then you have a society that's prepared for replacement. You have a society that's prepared for the most devastating extents of dehumanization, everything from enslavement to outright extermination. These narratives, these myths, that is probably the most important element, unless, of course, they do in fact create some sort of artificial general intelligence that is superhuman and is in some way out of human control. But either way, I think that the most important thing that human beings can do right now is to try to maintain a sense of dignity, a sense of agency. And if we don't cling to that, if we don't cling to the traditional modes of belief which centers the value in the human, then, in essence, we'll be lost. And it won't matter if the technology develops in that direction. It really will come down to a human race that has been taught to be subservient.
Got about 30 seconds here before the break. Are we the last fully human generation on Earth?
You and me? No way. We're good. We're good, Richard. Others, I fear they will be the last of their line.
All right. We will pick up on that point and many others. Joe Allen, author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, taking us into the break. Ozzy Osbourne and All My Life, right here on Coast to Coast AM.